Hi everybody, welcome back. So I hope you've had a chance to connect a little bit over lunch. This afternoon we have two panels which offer further opportunities for us to hear from higher education institutions across Scotland, and we've got presentations from many of our partners which will allow us to have a better sense of the wider landscape. I'm going to pass straight over to Jo Halliday, a senior lecturer in infectious disease ecology here at the University of Glasgow, to chair this session.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to ask our speakers to come up one at a time and then join together at the end of all of the session to sit up at the front. But without further ado, if Liz Rattray could come up and represent the University of Aberdeen, I'll hand over straight to you.
Thanks very much, everybody, for staying after lunch. And thanks again to the University of Glasgow for hosting in a fantastic building, which kind of exemplifies collaborative working. Well, I just... So yeah, I'm Liz Rattray, Director of Research and Innovation at the University of Aberdeen. And what I thought I'd do is kind of highlight a little bit around how this links to our overall strategy, and how we're utilising the SFC ODA funding that's been received, and a little bit about how we've used it in the past. But really to exemplify that we have embedded international development and partnership working within Aberdeen, our strategy Aberdeen 2040. And essentially some of those components are around ensuring that we've got some of the infrastructure to support international development. We have created interdisciplinary centres that span across from sustainable environmental sustainability to health and well-being, energy transition, data and AI, and kind of social inclusion. So working across the international development arenas. I wanted to pick up a little bit about what was mentioned this morning about the importance of linking education programme, primarily through some PGT programmes and PhD programmes. But it's a kind of key milestone for us about capacity building that relates to some of the work that we're doing around SDGs. And most of our research now, we do map onto the SDGs, and our education colleagues are beginning to map all of our programmes, educational programmes onto SDGs. So like everybody else, just to show our outputs and activity. So whilst we have research activity across all the SDGs, I really wanted to highlight kind of 4 main ones and 17, where in particular we did quite well out in the Times Higher Impact rankings. And quite a lot of this was around international development. The framework itself of SDGs doesn't just relate to international development, and I think the rest of the university and our other research colleagues are learning a lot around how they can contribute to SDGs, even at a national level. So it's been a hugely useful exercise, and we take part in this now every year. So what did we do? So our original SFC ODA funding, we had different pillars. We wanted to have some bottom-up approaches. We wanted some strategic relationships. We wanted to ensure that there were opportunities for networking. We created this through some of our pump priming activity. But we also trialled an NGO in residence type activity as well, and I'll come on to that. But in our recent activity, so for the next few years, we have done some pump priming, and we have supported projects that have existing relationships, because we recognise we need a mechanism to ensure that the relationships and the partnerships are sustainable. But we also recognise that there are a number of colleagues who have recently joined the university and early career researchers, so we need to find a way of supporting their activity. So in our recent call, we had about 30 projects, but increasingly we saw new overseas partners coming in. We saw around 15 countries being supported, and approximately 13 of the SDGs supported. So we had quite a few new colleagues join us that provided new partnerships, and then we had some of our international interdisciplinary fellows working across these as well. So I thought I would just give you a little bit of a summary of what we found in the work that we had done. So we are seeing an increase in our low to middle income countries' participation. And I think this was really important because, you know, when GCRF was cut, I mean, that was a really trying time for all of our colleagues working in this area. And the SFC funding that we had at the time, the flexibility of that was really, really important to maintain those trusted relationships and maintain those partnerships. And many of those are still active. And we had many letters from our partners thanking the University of Aberdeen for being so collegiate and maintaining those relationships. So we are increasing the number of participation, and at least 70% of them address at least one SDG. So many of our activities are across the SDGs. As you might expect, the University of Aberdeen, most of our activity relates to those 4 SDGs that are highlighted, almost, well, 45% around good health and well-being, and climate action is increasingly important for us. But I wanted to highlight this one project from Aziz, one of our colleagues in the business school, who had started working with colleagues in Bangladesh following the tragedy there some years ago. I think it's the 10th anniversary this year of the collapse of a building. And so he's been working with colleagues in Bangladesh, but also an NGO in the UK to collect the data, to collect the evidence of how you incorporate, you know, fair work, fair trade in the ready-made garment industry. So it was a really detailed piece of work. He's been recognised for it in different mechanisms, but that was a sustained relationship, having to build up the relationship with the factory workers, the factory owners, the manufacturers, and working with the retailers as well, presenting the data to the retailers in a really fair and transparent way that gave them the opportunity to comment, and then that was incorporated into the work. Yeah. So one of the structures that is quite important for the connectivity across the university is our Centre for Global Development. And Pamela Abbott, who couldn't be here with us today, effectively acted as our NGO in residence during our original SFC funding. So she helps to connect projects across the institution, providing that international development expertise. So colleagues in education, business school, biological sciences, and medicine. And so there are a number of projects that she works on, but again, it links different thematic areas around social justice. And her most recent project is around, funded by the NIHR with Rwanda and Ethiopia. And this is about trying to understand whether schools and educational institutes in those countries, you know, how mental well-being in schools can be improved and what's culturally relevant for them. Why does it have, am I going the wrong way? Oh, sorry. This is really confusing. Oh, am I going? Sorry, if I push it back. Yeah, that's great. So last slide really about an example, and this relates to a single academic, but equally important about how individuals build up long-term relationships with academic colleagues to then generate impact. And there are some key lessons in here. A lot of it's around funding, a lot of it's about the sustained partnership building, but also solution focused around what's important to that colleague, in this case, Ghana. So lastly, linking back to education, So I think this is really important around capacity building, whether it's research methodologies, whether it's teaching, but all of it having impact within a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the technical glitches. I think pointing that way is the tip. Can I invite our next speaker? Apologies if I get your name, I pronounce your name incorrectly, but I think Josine Opmeer here from University of Dundee.
Thank you.
And do correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I'm Josine, and I'm the Assistant Director for Research at the University of Dundee. I still feel quite new. I joined the university about years ago and still learning lots of things, including about international development research. Right, let's try this. Yeah, this is just our kind of marketing slide, so I'm not going to talk about that, but you know, our marketing department always wants us to come up with these kind of lovely things. So just let's go to the next one. We approached again this presentation very much a little bit like listed just now, looking back towards the sort of Scottish Funding Council, what we got and what we did with it. Everything is kind of linked also to our you know, our mission and our strategy at the University of Dundee, which is very much linked to the social purpose. So everything we want to do and everything we do is really kind of, you know, to confront the kind of global challenges and the SDGs that everybody's been mentioning. So our strategy is very much around sort of, you know, we've got research impact and engagement and enterprise and in teaching, and in the middle is that social engagement, and everything we do there is also with the idea about sort of making you know, global as well as local impact. Next slide, please. So we've also got linked to our strategy a couple of priority themes. You know, most universities probably got the same, but it's all about population health and wealth, climate action and net zero, and equality and inclusion. So all the projects that I'll be talking about, or and all the research that we do in this kind of area is very much kind of focused on these three around these three themes. The other thing that I wanted to mention, which cuts across these three themes, is what we do in Dundee is our African initiative, which is, you know, just wanted to mention that as well, because it links very much also to what was said in one of the previous talks earlier on. Next slide. So we've already mentioned GSRF funding. Of course, this was a huge loss to all of us that this wasn't happening. And I don't think actually we've kind of replaced that kind of funding. I wanted to make that point as well. I think we're still really struggling, you know, to keep funding this kind of research. We're all kind of bidding for the same pots of funding, and having something like GCRF and also what used to be DFID, all that kind of funding really be reduced very much, I think is a big loss to sort of to enable universities to do this type of research. So I wanted to look back slightly what we did with the GCRF funding in Dundee, and obviously you know, we're still kind of building on these kind of principles, which I guess everybody will have the same things in their universities. It's about building collaborations, you know, making sure we kind of really do research across all our different schools with the specific lower middle income countries. So these kind of, you know, points we're just taking forward in also the ISBF, which is a follow-on ODA funding. So yeah, next slide. So what we very much did with the GCRF funding and also now with the ISBF funding is to sort of, you know, create mobility schemes, making sure that people kind of create more impact from their research, building on what they'd already done, pilot prime projects, global, you know, PhD scholarships, challenge program awards, and I think we've had quite a few successes through these type of schemes from GCRF and followed on by the ISBF. Yeah, next slide. So it's also about really sort of also what Liz is really showing the impact of the Scottish Funding Council that we had. So, you know, it enabled 70 different projects. It's kind of established 150 new partnerships within local middle income countries, including universities, NGOs, industry, so quite wide ranging. Also enables us to make contacts, building obviously on things that we, on relations we already had, but I think also building new relationships in low middle income countries, and also across the university we had you know, over 100 staff involved in all the different projects that we kind of managed to fund or you know, generate kind of activities across. And also a lot of early career researchers were enabled through these kind of schemes. Yes, next slide. Yes, we've got a map as well. So this shows where we are sort of engaged. You can see again, sort of, you know, a lot of stuff happening in Africa, but also, you know, sort of Northeast Asia. So yeah, next slide. So obviously we've now got the follow-on ODA funding from the Scottish Funding Council, and so we used it basically to sort of to go back to some of the things we funded through the GCRF funds, and sort of to make sure we kind of give some more pump priming to really enhance the impact from the previous funding. We've supported 10 projects currently, and again we're engaging with lots of different countries: Ghana, Uganda, Malawi, Nepal, India, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa. So, you know, we do engage with a lot of different countries still, and these projects sort of keep continuing. Obviously, we do a lot more than this, but this is, we focused on the Scottish Funding Council money. So this, just wanted to highlight this. Yes, next one. So I've now got sort of 3 kind of key case studies that just wanted to highlight what we did with the funding. This is one of the projects that's sort of run from our life sciences school. It's really generated through the Wellcome Centre for Anti-Infective Research. Professor Ian Gilbert is leading on that. And actually the money from the GCRF funding enabled to set up a drug discovery hub in Ghana. And so that was set up in 2020. It's been really successful. So it's you know, it involves 5 different Ghanaian institutions, universities, as well as NGOs, and I think also some industry. And they all work together, you know, to sort of, yeah, we're just basically working with the Wellcome Centre to really support their expertise and you know, solving barriers, how to do sharing facilities and data and all of those different kinds things between them. And then we've used the kind of little pot of funding from the ISBF to sort of fund some more bursaries, particularly in Ghana, to facilitate access to equipment and travel and research costs. So it just enables us to sort of generate even more impact from that particular kind of project. Next slide, please. The other one is based from our health sciences department, and it's the maternal and midwifery unit in health sciences. Again, they had received previous GCRF funding, and which, you know, that had a massive amount of impact, and it was building on the the sort of really important piece of research in the Lancet series of midwifery. Again, the additional ISBF funding is working more with kind of Indian partners in Dundee to enhance the impact. So the other thing I actually wanted to mention, so some of these projects have actually then been funded following on, you know, through MRC, to Wellcome, to the Bill Gates, through Bill Gates. So it's also to show that we actually sort of this pump priming has led to much bigger projects, so including this one. And then the last, I think it's the last slide. Yes, so this is another kind of project. Again, it's also to show the kind of variety of disciplines that we've been able to kind of fund through all the ISBF and the GCRF and other funding as well. So this is a project that's actually led by Lorraine from Plug and Mark Cutler. Lorraine is actually here. She's also got a poster. The last slide will direct you to that. So, but again, this is, led from my kind of, from an environment school, and it's about displaced communities and environmental degradation and sustainable livelihoods in Uganda. It's been really, really important. So it had a lot of kind of policy impacts, and we've just given them another kind of little bit of money from the ISBF fund that will sort of support the full documentation of the impacts. So, but if you've got any questions about this particular project and also the next slide project, I speak to Lorraine and go and meet her at her poster. So this is another kind of big project that was not just funded through the Scottish Funding Council, but through other funds as well. But this has also been really, really popular. So this is a poster, so I'm not going to talk very much about that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that was perfectly on the end of the time. Okay, our next speaker from University of Edinburgh is Conor Snowden.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start the timer. I feel I've got a bit of a graveyard slot here mid-afternoon. Yeah, great. Thank you very much for inviting us today. And it's great to get the opportunity to share what we're doing in Edinburgh in the international development space. I've tried to focus today on some of the stories of our research. This in no way encompasses the full breadth of Edinburgh's research. It was quite difficult to sort of pick out specific things, and to be quite honest, it was the people who replied are the ones who got on. But it's there's a huge breadth, but I have to start with some numbers. So we're one of the newer universities in Scotland, only 1583, I think, and we're very passionate about our international position and our international outlook, and the international staff and researchers that we have in Edinburgh and the partnerships that we have. And I think that's something which, working in the international development space is something that we're really, really proud of and very, very keen to continue despite sort of international issues that are going on at the moment. A few more stats. I think some people have these. But Edinburgh is a research-intensive university. We have long established partnerships across the so-called global south. But the thing and I want to now recognise is that Edinburgh's position as a world-leading university has only come off the back of centuries of our work within a colonial and exploitative research system. And I think it's really important for us to recognise that. And that's something we are doing at Edinburgh. Around engaging with our partners, particularly in Africa, and funding a lot of research into our own impacts there, and both positive and negative. So I think it's quite important that we're looking forward, but also it's really important that we do look back as well and acknowledge that. So there are some numbers, but I'm going to just stick to some stories today. So I've tried to pick out across the breadth of the university and across funding sources, and also some where SFC money has been instrumental in developing that. The first one I want to mention is around vaccines in animals. This is a key area of research in the university out at our Easter Bush campus, and this project here, Professor Richard Mallamby has been working on vaccinations for rabies across large communities in the global south. And this is very much partnering with the local charities based on this, and that was always key to the work. And this is the sort of research where the researchers are picking a very large topic. They're piloting across a fairly small area. They've been working in Goa and in Malawi, but delivering hundreds of thousands of rabies vaccinations and seeing a very noticeable difference. Like in Goa, rabies deaths went to 0 from about 20 per year after this project went on. And in Malawi, there was a significant reduction in Blantyre in terms of rabies deaths in the years after this project. And this is the sort of work that is saving lives and needs scaled up ultimately. I think I'm going to try this one. Second area, moving to Latin America. One of our professors, Soledad Garcia Ferreira, has been working with many communities in Latin America connected to risk. Edinburgh is the host of the Tomorrow's Cities GCRF hub, which is one of the big risk and resilience hubs. And this project was a sort of a spin-off from that, looking at again, working with the local communities about measures that can prevent landslides, seeing what's effective, seeing what's not. It's these projects you'll see here, they range from small scale grants right up to multi-million-pound funds. So even small projects like this one are able to make a noticeable difference. And again, this sort of work has been taken on looking at communities in Nepal and Central Asia as well. That way. And then another work, this is actually the one that's actually only ongoing at the moment, but it's nearly finished. This was one of the GCRF projects that unfortunately suffered substantial cuts, but through various sources we managed to keep it going. And it's looking at communities and risk in a very holistic approach. And this is around a single volcano and the people living around a volcano in Guatemala. But it's looking at obviously hazard, seismic hazard, but also around the community risks. And again, focusing on that leadership of local organizations, which is so important. And then moving into impact a lot more. And they've produced a whole TV series on the work that they've been doing, which is on Guatemalan television, if you can find it. That way, sorry. Yeah. I'll just say this one's from our Murray House School of Education. My two colleagues, Michael Gallagher and William Smith, are here and have a poster on this outside. And again, another one of these projects and sort of suites of projects where they've been looking at digital education and also the barriers to education across low and middle income countries. And you can see there where they take a very holistic approach around a theme, you know, in terms of barriers to education, travel time, but also supporting digital education. I know working with refugees and displaced communities, and so how can and affecting policy as well. And I think that's a key thing which comes across with quite a lot of our projects is about policy impact. Next one was something completely different. Our Centre for Pesticide Suicide Prevention. Very, very niche subject, but actually kills hundreds of thousands of people in rural communities across the global south every year. Pesticides are the most common means of suicide amongst rural communities. And the standard approach was to provide with locked storage solutions to stop people accessing them. And interestingly, for research there in the first section, they showed that basically that produces absolutely no effect at all. So they changed the focus of the work, looking at actual regulation and dealing with government around bans and implementation of bans. And that is now seeing a huge reduction in deaths from pesticide suicide across, particularly in South Asia. The key thing there was engaging with World Health Organization. And this project actually started off with a small grant from the SFC originally, and it's the sort of thing we like to build. You know, it's been able to build up into a huge piece of work. And I know they're moving now into looking at other types of suicide and looking at prevention strategies with those. Oh, not that way. Next one. Something completely different is our Centre for Peace Studies. So this is actually a FCDO funded centre where we gather a huge amount of data around peace processes that have occurred globally over the last maybe 30 years, I think at least. And what they've done is it's something which hasn't been done before, but actually look at what has been produced and try and work out what works and what has been successful. I know they've been involved in South Sudan and in Colombia, and real world impact now is that small scale steps to peace processes are what works. You know, there's no big quick fix to any of these conflicts that we're in, but this has just been renewed, and we're really hopeful that it can be this sort of idea of peace and technology is something, and we're trying to do more about using processes to how did I get there? Yeah, and then TIBA, big thing which occurred around COVID was that we had a big NHR funded project tackling infections for the benefit of Africa. And with our SFC GCRF money during COVID, which we were able to repurpose really quickly, thanks to quick response from Scottish Funding Council, we were able to fund back in March 2020 work on the impacts of policy in Zimbabwe, and they were able to analyse that. It changed Zimbabwean government policy, and that meant that there was more people being provided with PPE in healthcare settings. And the big thing with TIBA is that I think we've talked about connecting north-south, and it's also really important, obviously, connecting south-south, and that's something where TIBA has brought in these 10 projects. And last but not least, oops, it's not working. Yeah, please, the next one. My colleague Christine is Christine Campbell. She has a poster outside, but this is one just to say because it's a Scottish government funding looking at cervical cancer screening in Malawi, and it's really small grants, but making a huge impact around people in rural communities having that cervical screening for the first time, and that's something that we want to really carry on in terms of looking at what is the actual impact on people on the ground. I was going to talk all about equitable partnerships, but I'll stop, and hopefully there's a question on equitable partnerships from somebody. Thank you.
Thank you for the timekeeping, really. Apologies. We'll come back to equitable partnerships. I'm going to invite Mary Ryan to come up and speak on behalf of the University of Glasgow.
Thank you, Jo. Let's see if I can make the clicker work. Ah, there we go. Okay, so like everybody else, I have a map. I just wanted to give a snapshot of overall at the University of Glasgow, our international development portfolio. And then I'm going to take you through how our ISPF ODA funding has fitted into that and how we've used it to really support our activity. So you can see this is as of the 1st of May. We are working with a lot of different funders, a lot of different partners, and our international development portfolio of research includes not just partners in the Global South. Those projects include partners all over the world. And so our map represents the entire network that we work with that does international development research that we are in collaboration with. And across the University of Glasgow, we have people in every single one of our colleges and schools that are involved in this kind of activity. They are connected through our research development network, the Glasgow Centre for International Development. If you're not on our mailing list, send me an email. But it is across the entire depth and breadth of the university that we have people working in this space. And our approach underpins everything that we try to do in this area. Fundamentally, and I think we've heard about it a lot about the importance of relationships. For us, relationships are more important than projects. Successful relationships lead to successful projects, but if you don't have those relationships, it's very hard to have successful collaboration. And the trust that's needed to have those solid relationships takes time, and as we've heard, it takes money, and it takes a lot of effort. And we focus on reciprocity, mutual benefit, a lot of the things that we've heard other people talking about today. And of course, that's really hard to do when there's limited resources and limited time. So we are trying to be transparent about the constraints that we have, both within the university. I spend a lot of time talking to our research community here about the various new things that they're going to have to be aware of. Trusted research springs to mind, but also the kinds of things that they need to be having open conversations with their partners about the challenges that they may encounter and the things that they need to be aware of. And along the back of this, we tried to provide practical guidance about how to navigate some of the challenges that people are running into. And we co-developed this guidance on some of the ethical challenges, not ethics approval, but some of the broader, more thorny issues that our teams run into in collaborative relationships where there are power imbalances, differential access, lots of different expectations and assumptions that underpin the work. And we're about to come out with some new guidance about how to do equitable partnership responsibly when you're traveling less, as we're starting to see environmental sustainability become a bigger factor. So keep an eye out for that. So in terms of how ISPF ODA has factored into that approach, We focused on strengthening some of our long-standing partnerships, really supporting those relationships and giving them additional support. We want to support new institutional initiatives. We want to build new partnerships and focus on areas where we are building collaborative new relationships. We also want to support our emerging research leaders who maybe didn't have the benefit of GCRF to build their international research networks and their collaborations. So we have a pump priming fund here within the University of Glasgow that allows them to do that. For the past 2 years, it's been funded by the University of Glasgow, but we've used our ISPF allocation to fund next year's round, this year's round. And we have a really big focus on mutual capacity strengthening. So capacity strengthening is one of our essential criteria in that internal selection round, but we're also looking to support projects that build capacity, and not just capacity in the global south, for lack of a better term, but capacity here at Glasgow to engage more effectively, openly, and flexibly with partners who have systems and processes and approaches that are not like ours. And as an aside, I'm running a capacity strengthening workshop for networking for research management and administrative professionals next February. And if any institutions would like to collaborate, find me at the coffee break. So a few of the programs that we have funded that I have pulled out that I think exemplify that approach and exemplify how we have used our ISPF ODA money to really focus on those relationships and build that mutual capacity. The first is the biodiversity, Serengeti Biodiversity Program. The University of Glasgow's researcher, Grant Hofcraft there, who's cutting some tail hair off a wildebeest, has been leading the Serengeti Biodiversity Program for about 10 years now in collaboration with a network of policymakers and stakeholders, Tanzania Wildlife Research Institute, Tanzania National Parks. They are long-standing partners for us. It's a major research platform that also links to our educational base. We have a master's in the conservation management of African ecosystems. Those students spend time in this program. And so we invested in their infrastructure, in their capacity, with a new to them, wasn't brand new, but it was new to them, vehicle, because that was what the local team said that they would find most useful, and 4 of these new LoRa gateways, which adds to the capacity of the park to track wildlife movements, particularly those animals that are of important conservation concern, which is the data that both Kenya and Tanzanian governments are really interested in when managing this ecosystem. So this investment supports a platform not just of multiple different research programs, it supports students, it supports local stakeholders, and it was responsive to what those stakeholders told us that they needed. So it's a critical infrastructure investment, really, that is supporting quite a wide range and a long-standing partnership. The second major investment we made was in the new Africa-Europe Clusters of Research Excellence. Glasgow is a member of the Guild. We also have a MOU with ARUA, the African Research Universities Alliance, and last fall, ARUA and the Guild launched these new clusters of excellence to really focus on creating centers and networks of expertise across several different remits. Glasgow co-leads 2 of them, one on parasitology, one on non-communicable diseases, and we are a partner on 3 additional cores. And so we wanted to ensure that those teams and those networks had the funding they needed to get together, co-develop their ideas, co-develop their approaches, think about how they could be working together. And so we invested in those strategic relationships to give those teams and those networks, a lot of which involve new partnerships, the time that they need to build strong relationships and take forward the collaboration. So that's where the time and the trust comes in. And then the last example that I want to flag is participatory urban analytics. So this is the Idea Maps project. It's been running for a while in the Brazilian context, but has now moved into Africa. And what they were looking for and what that project focuses on is citizen science-driven activity and local capacity for people working or living in deprived areas to take control of their own data, their own stories, their own research activity, and contribute and engage with policymakers, with researchers, and with the wider world. And so this focused on capacity strengthening, on data concepts, literacy, and visualization, not just for researchers, as you can see, but community members, policymakers, NGOs in Kenya and Ghana. And so the both the training and the equipment needed to develop that training, then allows the teams to take forward their own local training workshops. So they train the trainers so that now that work can continue locally. So it is about local empowerment and addressing really key data gaps when it comes to deprived areas, but giving ownership of that data and awareness of how to leverage it to local communities and local groups. So really trying to level some of these inequitable issues that we've all been talking about today. And of course, excellent. All of these things are now being pulled together and really supported and driven forward by the new initiative that Jamie is leading, which is Glasgow Changing Futures. So this is the strategic framework and underpinning ethos that the University of Glasgow is bringing to our international, well, our societal challenge research. And we have two current themes, sustainable futures and healthy and equitable futures. I think we're seeing a lot of commonalities in the sorts of themes that we're all trying to tackle as a sector. But this is an area that is evolving for the University of Glasgow. And if you would like to learn more about how we are taking forward our approach to addressing societal challenges, they also have a mailing list that you can join and you can email them there. So thank you all very much. And if you'd like to have more conversations about research management capacity strengthening specifically, please come find me a coffee.
Thank you, Mary. Can I ask our last speaker? Yeah. Thomas Meagher, I hope, or sorry on the pronunciation, from the University of St Andrews to wrap up this session. Thank you.
Oh, wrap up. GCRF funding was the thing to seize to help to partner up with ODA countries. At St Andrews with the little, we did quite a lot, and I'm here to tell you just what we got. Thus begins and ends my rap career. I'm the director of the St Andrews Global Challenges Forum, or was when it was still on. And like many of the universities that were the recipients of the SFC GCRF funding, there was a certain sort of tempo and life cycle to our programs. Earlier funding rounds were focusing on pilot studies, small projects. Successive funding rounds got bigger. And in our final funding round, wrong way, excuse me. We actually established a series of consolidator hubs. There were 2 of them, and these were pulling together multiple projects into larger programs. One of them was in medicine, focusing on public health issues in Africa. And the other one was on cultural heritage and was basically international around the world and very social science focused. So this is basically our last funding round, but huge thanks to the SFC because it was a great program. Over the course of the program, we managed to address or encompass projects that included many of St Andrews' priority research areas, ranging from international relationships to evolution and biodiversity, to medicine, sustainability. I'm not going to list them all, but anyway, it was pretty much inclusive across the university. It was also inclusive with regard to sustainable development goals. In this last round, we addressed all of them except for energy, and actually in earlier rounds, we addressed energy. So go St. Andrews, we hit everything. We also were able to, as is appropriate with GCRF funding, spread the money around, and we're able to invest in a range of partners overseas and ODA partners, because that's how to help to develop those ODA partnerships. Obviously academic institutions, but also government agencies, healthcare, NGOs, a whole spectrum of different partner organizations overseas. Okay, here's my map. I'm going to talk just for a minute about legacies from our program. I'm not focusing on specific projects so much, if you haven't figured that out by now. This is a very broad overview, but one of the elements of our program was the University of St. Andrews co-funded with a series of GCRF PhD studentships. So we had several cohorts of PhD students that are just now finishing up. So one of the lasting legacies of this program is going to be basically future leaders, in addition to the partnering and networking that was involved in the research program, which is also a durable legacy of the GCRF funding. In addition to that, and you really do have to aim it. At the very end of the program, we had a series of symposia, Sustainable Future Symposia, as part of our Global Challenges Forum. There were 4 of them all together. And actually, this was right at the height of my term as director, so I'm particularly proud of these. And we were just a couple of comments about the sustainable futures. Not even naming it. There we go. Another map. I'm on to 2 now. One of the things, and this is actually bizarre to say this, but in a sense, although there are so many ways that the COVID pandemic inhibited what we were able to do, there was one way that it actually kind of enhanced it. When we were doing the Sustainable Future Symposia, we were able to include attendees from 19 countries around the world, 228 people. This would likely have never happened if we'd had a live conference. It probably would have been a very locally focused audience. And another benefit of doing things online, this was in that sort of period when travel still wasn't on yet, but people weren't suffering from online fatigue to the extent that we seem to be now. And another benefit was being able to run multiple language tracks during the symposia, which we did, relevant to where the projects were taking place. The 4 symposium themes were equality matters, sustainable livelihoods, social justice, and evidence-based policy. Each one was consisted of joint presentations by a St. Andrews PI and an ODA partner, and then concluded with an invitational panel. And actually, I put links on here. All you need to do is click on the screen and you can go to them, or you could just go to the St. Andrews website and search Sustainable Future Symposium and it'll take you right there. And I think, well, I'll just add, just to sort of go all around to the very beginning, at least one of these, the Social Justice Symposium, included a partnership with a rap artist in Africa who was focused on climate change activism. So see, it is relevant. And I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I actually ask Thomas, can you turn around and can all of our speakers from that session come and sit at the front? And can any of you with any questions put your hand in the air and someone will come and find you the microphone? There's one here.
Well, only that someone said, asked me about equitable partnership. So could you comment on equitable partnership?
Yeah, no, I really just wanted to say at the end about how, and actually, Mary, you mentioned it, about how, you know, ethics and ethical partnerships, as we did call them now, probably equitable partnerships, we do a lot of effort in making it not a tick box exercise. It's not part of the ethics approval process, but it is. With our SSC funding back in 2019, we did a piece of work, Dr. Clara Callia in our Health and Social Science department, where she worked with about 50 researchers from across Africa around, you know, what is the equitable partnership journey, and part of that was really around, you know, it starts way before you even have met the person. And I think that was something which we produced with as part of our guidance. If you just search on the Edinburgh website for Equitable Partnerships Toolkit, it's freely available for anybody to use. And we are now doing a lot more training for researchers around equitable partnerships through our particularly our global health group, but we're looking to run more this year because it's part of this, what I mentioned at the start about how we need to, in some ways, it needs to almost be slightly unequitable, but the other way around, because I do think we need to address, you know, our obvious, you know, bias in terms of the history that we have. So I think there is a way, there's something there in all of this work, and apologies to academics in the room, but not all of our academics want to address that. They're there for publications and things, and so it's about continually sort of training and making people aware of the need in this sort of international development work for that equitable or even capacity building is part of it as well, relationship.
Actually, having asked the question, I'll just say that also with the ESRC impact initiative, there's a very good IDS working paper on equitable partnerships. Well, it's on the power of partnership, which was the FCDO ESRC conference that I helped to run, and it's an interesting work.
I think UK CDR has done a lot of work. The UK Collaborative for Development Research, which is the funders, basically has done a lot of work on this. Association of Commonwealth Universities also has some amazing training materials if you're looking to run workshops and things like that.
Does anyone else on the panel want to come in on partnerships or how they can be supported?
Well, I think I would just want to say that Edinburgh has developed a toolkit on equitable working. Glasgow has developed guidance, and I'm pretty sure we're not the only institutions in Scotland that have. And so I think it's worthwhile thinking about collectively, we've done quite a lot of work in this space, and it seems like we maybe should be sharing that. Certainly I like to Conor's guidance, and but it does seem like an area where we are all thinking about it, but maybe we haven't been talking to each other about how we're thinking about it enough. I'm not sure quite how to fix that, but hopefully today is a space we can start to.
Yeah, Mary, I was just going to add, actually, it's not just about equitable partnerships on the research side, it's the research management as well. And I think that's really important for the kind of offices that we lead, that our staff and colleagues, how they can contribute to that equitable partnerships during the finance arrangements, during the negotiation, during the ethics, all of that. So I think it's about the research in practice as well as research itself.
Actually, I appreciate that comment, and I'm going to expand on it a little bit. If you do a collaboration between two institutions in the UK, you're dealing with a common legal culture, you're dealing with a common institutional culture. Whether you're dealing with a relatively developed country like Brazil, or someplace where maybe you're dealing with an institution or an NGO that doesn't even have electricity 24/7 and possibly doesn't operate in English, there's a sort of a burden on the institution to support a wide range of different kinds of partnerships, bearing in mind that the legal cultures are different and they might require more work than a standard arrangement. And also they might take place in a different language. And that's also something else that you can't ad hoc, because I had this experience in Brazil where an institution required a certified translation. They couldn't accept anything other than that in order to enter into a legal agreement. So it's a way that institutions can support these partnerships by being more sophisticated about that.
I can have it. Azra, I'm just going to give you that one.
Thank you. I was wondering, in terms of we learning from our overseas partners, do any of the panel have highlight something which you've learned from your partners overseas? Thank you.
You want to take that one first? Your first, Conor.
I think the thing which has been new to me in doing these roles is around the concept of Indigenous knowledge, and quite a lot of our research works with with the communities in the Brazilian Amazon and in parts of Southeast Asia, and there is a huge amount that's coming out of there that we need to accept that it's different knowledge. It's not going to be published in an academic paper, but it is as a valuable an output as other concepts and needs recorded through film, through often it's through cartoon and animations in some communities, and so we need to be able to capture and reflect in our research excellence type activities that kind of knowledge, and it's very difficult for our structures, but we need to try and change that. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of so many things, I guess in keeping with the idea of the way we do research here at Glasgow, I mean, there are so many different kinds of ways to do research that are all incredibly valid. And the tools that we use to do research, I mean, even as something as simple as how much WhatsApp is used, how money transfers are used to facilitate engagement, expectations of what a real collaboration looks like. Those have been, really expanded my concept of what successful collaboration can look like and what the different ways are that you can accomplish it. And also what counts as an output can be very, very different. And a lot of the things I've learned have been more about how, in some ways not fit for purpose. A lot of the mechanisms we have here in the UK actually are for delivering the kind of research that we all aspire to do. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make changes that sometimes I'm not necessarily very hopeful that I'll be able to make, but you have to keep striving. And it's because every day I hear from people who want to work with us, but are teaching me things about how we make it really difficult. So.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think we've learned as well is more kind of from a research support professional side, working with, so we've been working with Malawi quite a lot, and talking to my sort of counterparts or people who support research, in other countries. And I think it's been really valuable to learn from each other because, it's a different world. And I think just sort of, it's not just about academic kind of interactions, but it's also about support interactions. And I think that's been really, really valuable from our point of view. So I think we've definitely learned, or we're still learning, a lot about how things are supported in that way and how we can then also support each other to sort of, support those collaborations between the academics. I think that's been really valuable.
I think one of the things that we found actually was much more in depth was about the co-creation methodologies and participations with communities, and kind of participate. I can't remember who talked about having your communities participate in the research. And I think we talk about that a lot in the UK about how to co-create, but actually in some of the international development, it was that, we were definitely learning in many of our research groups about how to employ that methodology.
Okay. Well, not rap. Yeah, please. The two things that I think sort of really came home to me observing our program is, first of all, that public engagement, working with communities or whatever, three things, is universal. Another thing is that career trajectories in different parts of the world are quite different. And it isn't the paper in Nature that's going to be a career maker in a lot of places. It's basically very basic capacity building. And I think that we need to bear that in mind because it's very easy to transfer our own sort of things about ref and all this other stuff to other cultures where it just simply doesn't apply. And actually, I think I'll leave it at that.